If you are into Warhammer Fantasy or 4000, you got to read this book right here. This one is incredible. This is a great novel. It I've never seen the nature of chaos set so clearly and intimately. It's kind of hard when the stakes are so high to really see everything that's going on here. But this book is fantastic. I just the cover is original, unique art that really does a great job of showing what's going on. There's the demon in the background. There's this guy, the sorcerer guy, and there's the protagonist right there. And this is from almost the apex of writing here. This is a forgotten art, right? Right, in these pages, a forgotten art. So here's the breakdown, the gist of what happens. Okay, there's a world. It's like a feudal world or something, and there's a great injustice there. There's a great injustice. These people, and the pleasure here is nothing I'm telling you is ever written in stone. You just kind of have to figure it out as you're going. You have to use your overall like Warhammer knowledge to put everything into context. So I'm oversimplifying things, and I'm kind of ruining the mystery of what's going on here. So there's these people in this feudal world, right? And there's a great injustice going on for whatever reason. There's a huge deal of injustice going on. There's like an imperial faction, and so they were left behind from the empire. There's some warp storm or something going on that isolates this world, and so they are keeping their iron hold over this world very tenuously, as it's like they can't repair everything. They're running out of ammo. The means to produce these weapons has been lost long ago. And so there's these like malcontents that are all kind of plotting to come together. There's the magic guy right here. There's like 3 or 4 different factions, right? And so this book probably isn't going to be too popular with too many people because it kind of plays out like the Italian Job, that movie from the 60s, where it's like 2 hours of preparation just for a 15-minute action scene. There's a lot that like there's a lot of times where just nothing's happening. But keep in mind, last time I read this was probably a decade ago or something like that. So I'm rolling off of what really stuck with me this whole time. And so that you've got the Imperials, and you've got like these chaos factions. And so the whole thing about the book is the whole theme, the whole plot is getting us the sacrifices ready so that when they face the Imperials, they can unleash a demon at them. And so they summon the demon. The battle's going on. The Imperials have tanks and armored transports, and like the Chaos guys, they have like some cool things too. Nothing as dangerous as a tank, mind you. But they're relying on the demon to help them. The whole point of this book is about summoning this demon to help them out, and the demon is content with just flying over the battle and just watching everything happen. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about what these mortals are concerned with at all. It can't be bothered. It goes ahead and it eats some corpses, and it makes some corpses, but corpses on both sides. It wasn't even like a catastrophically devastating force. It wasn't like unleashing a hurricane in the battle. It was just like unleashing a spectator with godlike power. And there's a couple really big things that go on here. There's a couple really great themes that you can take from this. First of all, there is no delineation between Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy, okay? There is no delineation. Now, what I'm saying isn't canon because with the after, okay, I like the end times. The end times are great, but it kind of breaks the lore after the end times, because in fantasy, everything is destroyed. Everything, even the gods themselves. But the gods in fantasy are the same gods that are in 40K, so that can't actually be true. Unless, you know, so it's like a separate dimension, if you would. Well, I mean, the end times establishes that 40K and fantasy are in separate dimensions or separate realities or whatever you want to call that, separate verses. But I don't believe in that at all. I don't like Age of Sigmar, mainly because it's so simple. Oh, this is where the Skaven live. This is where the humans live. This is where the Chaos people live. And it just undoes everything that the end times did. The end times was the end of everything, and then Sigmar could somehow piece everything back together. I don't know. Getting back on track, though, this book is great because it establishes that the fantasy themes present in Warhammer Fantasy can still be found in Warhammer 40,000. There's a crossover there. It's really about how much technology is available, how much technology is in play. What essentially this is, and I've been craving this for years, but I've never seen it done well, and I'm not convinced it'll ever be done well, just because there's going to be a bias for one side or another. But I would love to see a Warhammer Fantasy Armory facing a Warhammer 40K army. I mean, maybe not nowadays. Maybe not. I don't even know what 9th edition's like. But a 7th edition 40K army facing like a 5th or 6th edition fantasy army, it would be so cool. Having those marching phalanxes going forward. You know, like, they have guns, but we have might, men. Stab them with your pikes. And, you know, it could work out. It could definitely work out like that. It could definitely work out like so. That's really big. That's really, really big, because I've seen this theme in another book. It was about just these guys, and they're like in a feudal world, and the orcs invade them. I wish it's this book's in a compilation somewhere. I need to find it. It's so fun. It's so fun because these guys are just like peasants. Just peasants fighting off the orcish onslaught. And, you know, eventually one of them gets a Shuda. And so they make an entire cart. It's 3 or 4 guys. Just the whole thing they do is they shoot a Shuda. And it shows, you know, the scale of orcish weapons compared to human weapons, and that they're so willing to adapt it. And then, you know, there was a great twist at the end. The reason the main character lived through all the ordeals because he was a psyker, kind of like a Jedi in a way, where he could see what happened before it happened, or some sort of prescience like that. And at the end, he gets taken away to the black ships, you know, because the Imperium comes with their space marines, and he's just like, what is that? That's so cool. And then they pick him up by the scruff of the neck, and they take him to the black ships. So the 40K fantasy crossover is so great. Typically crossovers are just cringe. Typically crossovers just like appeal to the worst in consumers and consumerism. The worst crossover I've ever seen is a cat AT-AT from Star Wars. It was on my manager's fucking vehicle. It's a slight against God. It's absolutely a slight against God. But these crossovers are incredible. So yeah, it has the crossover factor, right? And I've hit that point enough. But the real lesson here, the real thing that you want to learn is there is no such thing as an Imperium of Chaos. There's absolutely no such thing as an Imperium of Chaos. You can't have it, okay? They had Games Workshop released a supplement in the 80s called Imperium of Chaos, and they retconned it. You know, some things are very notable when they retcon them. Very, very notable. The biggest notable retcon that I can tell you is whether or not Horus hesitated from striking the Emperor a mortal blow, or whether or not the Emperor just beat him. So that's kind of like a crazy retcon that it results in a controversy that no one really gives a shit about, because no one gives a shit about the lore anymore. But there's no such thing as Imperium of Chaos, okay? Abaddon the Despoiler You know, like, look, I get trolled all the time. I'm not going to admit it on the online forums, but there's something that the loyalists say that really just boils my blood. And that is fail Baden, armless Abaddon, armless, fail Baden, 13 failures. You do not win the long war via conventional means. And this might go for either side, but more so with chaos, okay? Chaos is not a solid foundation to build upon. If you build an empire with a foundation of chaos, by definition, it's at best it'll fall apart. At worst, it'll become something from your worst nightmares. And it will grow to a point where it's no longer sustainable and it'll fall apart. I mean, the closest thing to an Imperium of Chaos that I could really show is on the Soul Drinkers novel, The Bleeding Chalice. There was this necromancer named Tectoract, and he just had systems under his control of the dead. The dead just they were his. They were his to do whatever he wanted with. And he had some dead that were just like zombies, and so he could just fill a ship up to the very brim of it and just send it onto a planet and just have them spread it. Then there was the semi-competent dead, and these guys were zombies that could shoot guns. Mind you, not accurately, not competently at all. There's no drill, there's no ceremony. They can shoot guns, but that's still pretty intense. And then he had like a court of freaks that basically advised him on what to do. They basically were just traitors. That, functionally speaking, they were just traitors. But he wasn't. I don't know. He wasn't exactly chaotic in the way he did things. So maybe he counts, maybe he doesn't. But that's the most stable example of an Imperium of Chaos I've ever seen. And so the Soul Drinkers just kill him and everything falls apart. So, whereas like an actual Imperium, even if someone went and somehow killed the High Lords of Terra, whatever the fuck they're called, those like 4 or 5 guys that run everything, the Imperium would go on. In fact, I'm sure that most of the Imperium wouldn't even know that it happened. It could be swept under the rug pretty inconsequentially. They'd still be paying their tithes. It's not centralized. So, there's a big difference between Abaddon and Horus. I don't necessarily think Horus wanted to make a new Imperium. He more or less wanted... So Horus was mortally wounded, and for whatever reason, the seer came to heal him, and as she tainted him, but he saw a vision of the Emperor ascending into another plane of existence. Maybe it's what the old ones did. He was going to become a god, essentially, and Horus was jealous, or he felt like, because, everybody was freaking out when Horus left the Great Crusade. Everybody was freaking out. What? The Emperor's not at the front anymore? And so there's this almost separation anxiety felt by everyone in the Great Crusade, or at least a great portion of them. I'm sure Dorne trusted him. I'm sure Gilliman was building an empire himself, so he maybe couldn't have been bothered. But I'm sure Gilliman felt pretty jaded at the fact that he didn't become War Master. And so there's already this idea of dejection kind of cemented in Horus's mind, and he saw that the Emperor would be leaving everyone behind, and he felt kind of gypped. So he made all these pacts with all these dark gods, and it went just as you would imagine. Things got really bad and really toxic. For whatever reason, at this point in the Horus Heresy, the Chaos Gods are still kind of like, it's less meaningful to think of them as 4 gods and more meaningful to think of them as like one conglomerate. That for whatever reason, they completely locked ranks. Maybe it's because, if Horus won, they would have won. Kind of like Archeon. But Abaddon understands what happened to Horus. Horus died, and even after he died, everyone fought over his corpse. Fabius Bile made a bunch of Horus clones, and that's the greatest sin. The greatest sin in the Eye of Terror is cloning. All right, you can genocide people, you can do even meaner things to them, but you don't clone. You never clone. Nope, nope, nope. Don't clone them. Abaddon saw what happened to Horus in his body, and it was Horus got what he deserved. You know what the Emperor's children did during the Siege of Terror? Sorry, the Siege of Terra. Do you know what they did during the Siege of Terra? They just went on a killing spree. They just went on a killing spree, and they weren't hunting down Imperial soldiers. They were hunting down Imperial citizens. An entire legion let loose on a planet. To me, that's horrifying. That to think that the defenders, I don't know, it's what those people went through was probably the worst anyone's ever gone through. But what if they would have led their might? What if what if Lucius was on the flagship? You know, what if? There's so many what ifs, and they definitely deserved it. There was bickering amongst even the troops fighting at the Palace of Terra, the Golden Throne, or no, it wasn't the Golden Throne yet. And so, in short here, this book does two really incredible things. It bridges the gap between Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy, and it establishes that you can't put your faith in chaos, okay? I thought that I knew chaos. I've got a tattoo. I've got an 8-pointed star tattoo. And you can't mistake them for being just an evil Imperium, because they're absolutely not. You know, for as long as for most of the time that I was playing Warhammer 40,000, but the thing is compared to the Space Marines, the Chaos Space Marines, in many aspects were lacking. And you know, for years I was just like, well, I wish we had that. I wish we had that. But guess what? We had maybe not so much more, but we had different approaches. All right, chaos is not the conventional take. If you're looking for the conventional victory, you'll never find it with chaos.